This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our weekly board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Will Marie Newton, and I will be moderating this call. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself while the presenters are speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you're calling in from your cell phone, please take a moment to physically mute your cell phone, as I'm unable to mute you from my computer unless I mute all participants. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under services. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Rader. I'm Executive Director of CABE, and it's so nice to see so many of our members, our board chairs on this call. We decided this week we're going to do something we haven't done in a couple of weeks, and that is spend more time talking about what you board chairs are doing. Obviously, the plans for reopening are due tomorrow. Every district was required to have 3 plans. And I hope you'll be able to get them in on time. We're hearing from a number of districts that these are causing difficulties for them. We know that the final decision on what plans to use and certain other parts of the requirements will be addressed by the governor later, more towards when we open schools. We certainly pushing the commissioner and the governor to do it as soon as possible so people can plan. We have a few updates this week, so I want to start with Patrice. Everybody knows Patrice, our Deputy Director and General Counsel.
Good morning, everyone. And Bob referred to the fact that your plans are due tomorrow. The State Department of Education did send out 2 communications earlier this week. One to clarify that every district is expected to submit 3 plans, one of which would provide for full reopening, all students, all grades, 5 days a week. And then the hybrid model and the third plan being for full distance learning. They also communicated that there were resources within the department to assist districts that were particularly challenged in putting together their plans. So there is a State Department of Education Reopen Schools support team, and that includes the Chris Clouet, who's a former superintendent of schools and is now a special advisor to the commissioner, as well as their Director of Legal Affairs, their Chief Financial Officer, Kathy Dempsey, their Chief Academic Officer, Chief Performance Officer, and Chief Talent Officer, as well as the Special Education Division Director. So they really have a full team available to help your staff think through what the options might look like, whether that be around physical configuration, need for additional space, or actual delivery of academic and support services. Bob, I think you want to talk a little about the CEA Reopen document.
Yes, well, I have right in my hand the parts of the CEA document that came out, I guess it was yesterday or on Tuesday. You should know that there is going to be a car parade in a number of places today, pushing for the CEA's objectives. Let me just tell you what the objectives are, and then we're going to ask Patrice to talk about the MOUs, which at a local level are being discussed. So here are the 6 specific actions that must be taken according to the CEA before schools can reopen. One is delaying the opening if CDC and public health and safety requirements for schools cannot be met. 2 is guaranteeing the state will provide districts with funding for all COVID-19 expenses so that school districts can meet the CDC and public health and safety requirements. This is something that we certainly agree with, and we have been pushing for funding, obviously, for our members as well. The third thing is recognizing and addressing the risk for students, teachers, and staff during a pandemic. Fourth is understanding that moving the economy forward depends on the safety of schools, not just reopening schools. And fifth, allowing districts to begin the school year through distance or remote learning where necessary. For any in-class learning, districts must reduce density through staggered schedules to meet CDC and public health and safety requirements for the schools. And the sixth thing is requiring weekly testing for all students, teachers and staff who return to school, and institute contact tracing protocols. Now, right before the meeting started, I got something from sent out by the state that Connecticut employees can return to work sooner, and that negative coronavirus 19 test is no longer required. So what we're hearing from the state is that the tests are not as necessary in business as they were. There is no requirement for such testing that I'm aware of in the schools. Am I right, Patrice?
Absolutely. And I think one of the concerns is that one of many concerns is that a requirement for weekly testing would exceed any capacity that the state has for testing and also for timely turnaround of results. That's one thing that we've heard on the national level is that if you're doing testing, what's very important is that you get the results back quickly, because otherwise the whole purpose of the testing is defeated.
Right. And I think we all understand what's going on in other states. You all know about the addition of different states to the list of those that in which, if you're coming from one of those states and you come back to Connecticut, you have to quarantine and sign a form and so on. So everybody is trying to do what they can. By the way, I saw a map today that showed Connecticut is in better shape than any other state, less than 1% contagion, and that is just great news for Connecticut. And let's hope that those who are sick from other states stay in their own states. Patrice, I'm going to ask you to talk about the memorandums of agreement.
We know that the teachers unions in many districts have already approached the superintendent and the board with a draft memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement, essentially an amendment to your existing collective bargaining agreement. Since there are no finalized reopen plans at the moment, it is definitely premature to start a formal negotiations process, because if you do so, that starts the statutory timelines running. You certainly, I think every district has included teachers on your committees that are planning your reopening and looking at the three options, and that's very appropriate, and that participation should continue. Some of the things in the that are being proposed in the MOU do not relate at all to health and safety provisions. That one of the proposals is to require that every district provide every teacher with a computer and a $50 monthly contribution towards their internet and electricity bills. So just be aware that until there's actually a finalized plan that would trigger impact bargaining, it is not advisable to enter into any sort of formal discussions. That's it, Bob.
Okay, now I'm going to turn things over to Vin. Vin was going to talk about some of the policy issues going forward. Vin is our director, a senior staff associate for policy services.
Good morning. As I've been saying, in most cases, your existing policies are appropriate. It's how you implement them that you need change protocols. But there are some new ones that we'll have available shortly. We're currently working on one. It's an emergency family medical leave policy, and it includes expanded sick leave. That was a part of some federal legislation that was passed, and I suspect as we get closer to the reopening school in whatever form or shape that happens, that there may be greater use of those provisions. And hopefully we'll have that available toward the end of next week. While we've tried to stay away from a lot of new policies, we have drafted one new one that also will be available next week. I thank Patrice and Bob for their review of that policy. It's a COVID-19 emergency measures policy. I call it a blanket policy. I'm still trying to keep your policy manuals in decent shape size-wise. This particular policy covers a number of key issues. Talks to health and safety issues, symptoms of illness that may show up in the schools, physical distancing, face masks, cleaning and disinfecting, student arrival and how to handle that, some hygiene issues, food preparation, transportation, and even transfer of funds to make some of these plans possible. That policy we hope to have available also middle or the end of next week. It's number 6114.82. Also, as a reminder, we do have available, and it's been our most requested policy, a sample policy pertaining to face masks and face coverings. That is a required policy, a new required policy from the reopening guidelines. Also, another new policy, because the Office of Early Childhood made a recommendation regarding a policy pertaining to the governor's travel advisory and self-quarantine, and that one is available currently. The other one, we're currently also working on in anticipation of school reopening, some modification to the existing policy pertaining to visits to schools. Again, trying to keep the number of people physically present in the buildings at a lower level. And also as a reminder, we're getting closer to mid-August when Title IX, the new regulations kick in, and the need for a policy by the middle of August, and the training that policy also speaks to. That's pretty much where we are right now in terms of changes on the policy landscape.
Thanks, Vin. And I see there was a question about, yes, John Prince got it. There is information we put all of the policies, and there are a great deal of them, in the publication of what is the role of board members or boards. I don't remember it exactly, that we sent out to all board members and superintendents. I believe it was late last week.
Yeah.
Or early this week. Vin, did you want to say something?
What I was going to say is that we put that together. It's not the first time that we've done that, is to kind of ask you to use that as a checklist. So we use our codification, obviously, because most districts in the state use our policy codification and provided the numbers, and use that as a checklist, in fact, to see where you stand with those particular issues. The great majority of those policies are available on the CABE website in our core manual, which is found in the member section of the website. If it's not there, certainly send us an email, and if you're looking for that particular policy, and we'll send it out to you.
Then the policies you talked about, the new ones,
yeah,
I assume they weren't in the list that we put out in that
no,
paper?
they were not. These are new.
So at some point we should put together a new list, including those when you're ready, when you can do that.
Well, we always say policy is, the manual is a living document. It's never finished.
Yes, that's true. It's always fluid, sort of like the plans for this summer and the State Department's plans. I'm going to turn it over for a minute to Lisa to talk about our summer leadership conference.
Great.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everybody. And first of all, thank you for all the hard work that you're doing right now. It is not lost on us by any stretch of the word. So thank you very much for what you're doing. I'd like to take a minute to talk about an upcoming program.
Just playing the case.
If somebody's on a cell phone, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. I'd like to talk about our Summer Leadership Conference. As many of you know, we're typically talking about being at the shore this time of year with our Summer Leadership Conference, and that just is not possible this year. So what we have done is put together a virtual program, a series of webinars that will be our Summer Leadership Conference this year. What a great way to kick off our 10th annual Summer Leadership Conference. So a little bit about it. First of all, you can register by going to our website, which is cabe.org. And if you click on professional development and then upcoming workshops, you'll see the information there. The workshops are going to be held next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the following week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You may register for one or all of them. If you register for all of them, there is a discount associated with it. Should you register for any or all of them, please note that this is a two-step process. It's a little bit different than our regular registration process because they are being delivered virtually. So you'll register as you do through our database, and then you'll be instructed to go to a second link to make sure that you then get the webinar information. I apologize for the two-step process, but this is the best way to contain everything within our database because you will be eligible for Board Member Academy credits if you attend all 6 sessions. And so the database tracking of that information is really key for us. So the 6 sessions kick off next Tuesday, which is July 28th. All sessions are going to be held from 12 to 1:15. If you are unable to join them live, we will be recording them and making them available to people who register. This is key. You have to register as if though you were going to be attending in person. And then we will share the link with folks after the meeting for you to participate in the webinar. And certainly should you have any follow-up questions after participating in it in that way, please feel free to reach out to us and we will help you get the answers that you need. But anyway, as I started to say, session 1 is next Tuesday, July 28th, and we are going to be joined by Commissioner Cardona to talk about the role of board members as leaders in a time of crisis. I think that we certainly fit the bill for that right now. We are in crisis, and you do have a very important role. So we are fortunate enough to, with all the things going on, to be able to be on the commissioner's schedule next Tuesday. The following day, Wednesday, July 29th, we're going to talk about unprecedented leadership, navigating legal, policy, advocacy, and governance issues. As you might imagine, the CABE senior staff will be the folks addressing those sorts of issues. That's what we do every day for all of you. And then on Thursday of next week, we are fortunate to have Dr. Martha Brecking-Harris with us again. You may remember that she recently did a webinar for us, which was very successful, on Dear School Board members, your students and staff of color are not okay. What can school boards and superintendents do? If you have not had the opportunity to view that, if I might ask if you're on a cell phone to please mute yourself so that we don't have the background noise, that would be really helpful. Thank you. If you have not had the opportunity to view that webinar, please go to our website, Professional Development Webinars, and it is one of our archived webinars. It was a wonderful conversation with Dr. Brecking-Harris. This session is going to be the next logical steps in that, a follow-up to that conversation and our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We take Friday and Monday off, and then we start up again August 4th, and we're really fortunate to have with us from NSBA Center for Safe Schools, Adam Lustig. He's going to talk about trauma and adverse childhood experiences. As we know, many of our students have experienced trauma during this time of the COVID crisis for a variety of reasons, whether it be loss of a family member, the fact that they're home rather than in a safe school, those sorts of things. So we're very fortunate to have Adam with us. Wednesday, we've got three people presenting. Wednesday, August 5th, what school boards need to know about finance and building preparations and maintenance in light of COVID-19. Two of our partner groups, CASBO and the Connecticut School Buildings and Grounds Association, have members who have presented for us in the past and have stepped up to do so again this time. We have Bernice Risk, who's the business manager in Naugatuck. Some of you may remember hearing from her in the past at a CABE program. Rich Carmelik, who's the COO of Ed Advance, and again, Rich has presented for us a number of times over the years. And from the Connecticut School Buildings and Grounds Association, we have Wayne Casper, who's the Director of Facilities and the Transportation Coordinator in Bloomfield. So they're going to be sharing from their perspective what they would like board members to know, what you all need to know. And then finally, to wrap it up, and I will then wind down and turn it back to Bob, our last session, which is Thursday, August 6th, is about student voice. We're very fortunate to have the two student members of the State Board of Education who just rolled off, if you will, off of the state board because they have graduated. Milan Chand, who addressed the state board on June 17th about mental health and education, as well as Sophia Chin, who the same day addressed the state board about perspective and curriculum and teaching. Both incredibly articulate young folks who are more than excited to be joining all of us and talking about not only these two topics, but other things that you may want to know from them about their experiences. They're very happy to share their experiences in public education in Connecticut. And that will wrap up our summer leadership series. You should know that we'll be trying to do more of these sorts of series, in the coming weeks and months, but we couldn't let a summer go by without a summer leadership conference. So I do hope that you'll join us. And again, go to our website, cabe.org, click on professional development, and then upcoming workshops to register. And if you have an issue with registering, you may email Nancy Prophe in our office at npropfe@cabe.org, and she will be very happy to help you out. And remember, it's a two-step process. It's not one step to register, it's two steps. That's all I have. Thanks, Bob.
That's great. And Megan just asked, will the leadership series segments be available on the CABE website as well if board members miss a session?
So
if that, Lisa, I think the answer is yes.
They will. You must register in advance to receive the recordings. They're not going to be made available where everybody has access to them. But if you register in advance, we will make sure that you do have the link to view it at a time that's more convenient for you.
Okay, thank you all. Any of the other senior staff have anything they want to update the board chairs on? Okay, so let's go ahead to really the big issues that districts are facing. Patrice and I came up with a bunch of questions. Mostly it was Patrice, so I don't want to take credit, but I will start out with one that I think is very important, and that is, have you or members of your board been talking to either legislators, congresspeople, even the governor's office about the resources you are going to need to get our kids back to school? And this is your chance to share, your chance to speak. So please don't be shy.
We do know that your districts by last Friday had to submit to the Department of Education the cost estimates for your additional costs around reopening or pivoting to a full distance learning environment. In conversations with the commissioner, they are using that information in their discussions with the governor's office, and it is anticipated that perhaps early next week the governor will make some definitive announcement with respect to state resources.
So have any of you talked to people who can help us with this? We hope you're lobbying, not just coming onto our webinars, which we do appreciate. But it's real important that everybody understand the fiscal situation facing our members.
So
Hi, Bob.
Christine Cohen
This is,
in
sorry.
Senate District of 12 is the senator from Brantford, and she's on the Education Committee. She's a friend of education. She used to be a school board member in Guilford. So she's very well plugged in, and we have talked. Sean Scanlon is also a representative, not a senator, who is very plugged into insurance and those kinds of funding needs. So this part of the state is pretty well covered in that regard.
Liz?
Bob, it's Liz. It was interesting. Last Monday, Senator Murphy and Congresswoman Johanna Hayes held a roundtable in Waterbury with strategic partners. The mayor was there, the superintendent. I represented the Board of Ed people. There were teachers, and it was excellent. And we've been trying to support the package from the federal government that includes new monies for states as well as for childcare and PPE and so forth, especially related to FEMA, making sure PPE is included in a reimbursement and so forth. So it was a great roundtable, and I think I'm confident that our elected officials are very supportive of funding for all of these issues.
Hi, Bob. This
I
is
would.
Megan
This is
from up in the
Sheila
Northeast
McKay. I
corner.
would just. No, go
Sheila, please go ahead. I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, with that document that Patrice said you all had to, you had to file, or the district had to file by the 17th. That's a great working document to be able to have a conversation with your legislators. They can better advocate for you if they know in a narrated way, a story, so to speak, what the costs are. Are you having to rent a facility to store some of your, rugs and, soft items, as I read in an article in West Hartford. The different things that maybe people aren't as aware of in terms of having to rent a facility to store some things. So that's a great document. If you don't have it, if your district hasn't given it to you, which I would be surprised, just make sure you understand the costs associated with what your district's going to be going through.
Thanks, Sheila.
I just have a quick question for, we haven't had any roundtables up in the Northeast corner. We haven't had anything organized. I have had informal conversations with our state representative and senator. But if we to put something in writing, are there specific talking points from CABE that should be included? I have a very small district, but I would like to be able to highlight the statewide talking points and priorities in that letter to, with hope, give some greater strength to what we're asking.
I would, we can do that for you, but I would honestly tell you it's a health and safety measures and it's your structure. So, those two items probably can be found in the document I just referenced. You want to make sure that you can safely get kids back into school in terms of masks and any type of cleaning that needs to be done, and then any type of structural changes that need to be made to the school. And that's just but two items, but if you hit those, then that's pretty good.
Those have been hit. I just didn't want to leave something out that would have greater strength in numbers.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I would say to everyone on this call, since the House of Representatives is actually in session today, and many legislators are going to participate from their offices at the Legislative Office Building, if you haven't been in touch, particularly with your House members, this would be a great time when you get off this call to send them a quick email and just remind them about the needs of your district. That the funding piece is not part of the special session, but anytime legislators convene, it's a chance where they're talking to each other, they're talking to their leadership, and so it's good to have this issue at the top of their minds.
Great. Lydia, you have...
Yeah, they're it's a great time, because I agree, because they are they do have to be in the building to be able to vote today. So they're likely going to be at their desks for each vote. Do they have to be? So yeah, that's a great time.
Lydia, did you have a comment?
I did. Question just for Patrice. You'd mentioned something about once the governor comes to state funding, how is that going to be allocated to the districts? You'd mentioned in a previous conversation.
Right. We don't have any details on that as yet.
Okay, all right. I also am in touch with my state senator, Kevin Whitcoast, who is up in this neck of the woods. And actually, we're going to meet on Friday because it's obviously fundraising time for all of them. But he even asked me. He said what can I do to help your district? I said, well, actually, I said, since you represent 13 districts. And municipalities, I said, let's talk about what you can do for all of us. And I even suggested to him, I said, listen, possibly put together a Zoom call, with the superintendents and board members that are interested to talk about really what is going on from here forward as we are, re-entering into the stage or entering the stage of going back to school. And he was very, very interested in that because he hasn't heard from a lot of board members. And so I said, well, now's the opportunity so that you can really hear what is going on in districts so that you're going to know once you get back in session, but once you're called back, so you have an idea what is going on in all our districts because we're a month away. So he was very interested in that. And I also called about 2 other board members in our region up here to meet at this fundraiser so we can just basically sit down and just have a time to chat about this. But I'm glad he was interested in this because I reached out to him and said you need to know what is going on the ground and this affects all of us, not just in your district, Senator Whitcoast, but in the state.
Great. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I see from the chat that several board members, Christine and Katie, have been in touch with their delegation, so that's terrific.
Absolutely. And Julie wants to join your meeting, Lydia, if you see in the chat room a little ask. I won't embarrass either of you by going any further with that, but you can discuss. Reopen plans, what are they looking like? We are hearing on our listserv and of course from the CEA, how difficult it is for some districts to bring everybody back at the same time. That is obviously the desire of the state at this point, could be subject to change depending on health and safety matters, but I'm wondering, what are your plans looking like at this time? John?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, yes, no, I had to unmute myself. I'm wondering if other chairs and board members are a problem that has cropped up recently is families. So if you're doing double sessions, half in the morning, half in the afternoon to cut down on the census within buildings, families that have more than one child in the schools, is it a logistical nightmare to make sure that they attend during the same session so it's not that much more of a burden on families where they would have, I guess they would have a full day of school anyway, but to make it easier for them to have their children go to school in one bunch and then be together. So that was a concern that I've heard, and I'm not sure how that will be addressed.
I could speak to that from our district.
Who's that?
It's Candace.
Thank you.
So we're not doing split sessions, at least at this point. Our approach is alternating days in the hybrid model, and we're trying to align all 3 levels so that our working hypothesis is we would just split kids alphabetically down the system. So if you're A through whatever is the cutoff point, you come these 2 days, and if you're the other half, you come these 3 days, and we would align that through the schools so that families aren't split on different days.
Cool, thank you. Just curious, how big is your district?
About 5,600.
Oh boy, okay, thank you.
And
This
that's
is
the hybrid model, right? That's not everybody going back all the time at the beginning, right?
Yes, that's the hybrid model.
How about the everybody going back at the same time? What are the challenges you're running into? We know that high schools have had, at least in some districts, are really going to have a problem with that, as we've seen on the listserv. But I'd like to hear how you're dealing with it and what's happening in your districts.
So this is Peter Bernstein from Greenwich. We have 2,600 plus students in our high school. It is one of the largest in the state. We are not comfortable at this point having them all in the building at the same time. Obviously, the guidance from the department has been if you submit a plan that they're not all in the building, you're out of compliance. I'm really not sure how to reconcile this. We're supposed to be able to make local decisions, and yet they're telling us we can't.
Can I add to that as well? Sorry, don't want to talk too much, but we are seeing a big challenge at the high school and also currently at our middle school because we happen to have both of our middle schools in one building together, which is unique to our situation. But essentially, the team's been working on this for, however long, a month or longer, and we really cannot. I know the rule is to socially distance to the extent that we can, to cohort to the extent that we can, but essentially we've come to the conclusion that we cannot socially distance and we cannot cohort. So I guess my question is, I think that we should approach the state and get an epidemiological opinion. Is this what you had in mind? Is this what you think is okay with the low transmission rates? Or is it that you wanted us to really social distance and cohort, and because we can't find a way to do it, we're going to shift for the upper levels? And how would that conversation happen and when?
I would expect that when the department receives your various reopen plans, and then working with their staff team, their staff support team, and with their access to the state medical experts, I think that that's when that conversation it can appropriately happen.
We know that the commissioner is very well aware of this problem. We're on a call once a week for a short period of time with the commissioner, and he has said that he is aware of the problem. Now, I don't know that he's going to be able to make a decision. I would suppose the governor is the final authority on these kind of things. But I think you will see, at least I hope you will, some kind of SDE statement or actual plan to address these concerns. They're just coming from too many districts who are struggling, especially with the high schools.
Right. Bob, this is Debbie from Wilton. It does not, when the commissioner comes out with a statement that says remote learning, will not count if we're doing the full overall. So that's a bit of consternation. As you know, you and I have spoken and I have emailed. The State Department have not heard about the high school issue. I do think, the little I know anyway, the data, health data around different ages of students is different. The possibilities of cohorting at a high school do not exist. The idea at our high school anyway of only being able to do 3 feet of social distancing. High school kids change classes all the time. You can't stay in the same room, yada, 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 all the problems that we're experiencing. So I'm really wondering, I think the state, in my personal opinion, needs to acknowledge that perhaps different ages of students need to get treated differently. And perhaps one model will work for one age group and another model is better for another age group. And at least undergird or open the idea to phasing things in. Everything else in the state was done in a phased approach. So at the high school, rather than start with a full open, can't we start with a hybrid model, work with that? If the health data holds, if we get more information about high school transmission, et cetera, then ultimately aim for the full open. Of course, we would all like that. But I think at this point, the directions seem to be too much too soon for the high school. And it's running, sort of contrary to some of the most recent data that's come out about older students being more like adults in the transmission and susceptibility to COVID. And I can't sort of enterprise in the state that puts adults 3 feet apart for 6.5 hours a day, has them move around the building. I'm not sure masks sufficient. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question of masks, especially at the very youngest, with the very youngest kids, I would think, but without any evidence, I would think that would be something that would be considered as well. Debbie wrote a really good letter to Chris Clouet explaining exactly what she just said here about the difficulties they're finding in Wilton. I'd encourage you, if you're having issues, let them know. Again, I'm not sure that Chris Clouet is going to give the best answer. Chris is in charge of the questions and answers. He's a very good person who we have worked with many, many times and is glad to work with school boards. But I would certainly send in something if you're having trouble so that they're aware of it and they have some evidence.
Can I get clarification on the comment about remote learning? So we have a K-8 district, pre-K-8 district, but we are between 15 and 20% responses from our families saying that they will not be sending their children back into the classroom to start. And that does not include our high school where we send our students. So if those families will be electing to have the remote learning provided by our district, does that count for them? Does it count for school days for them or the work that's being done?
Yes, there will be additional guidance on the issue of those, what should be provided and what the parameters will be around families that choose to continue distance learning even when school is available in person for their child. But the intention is that those days will count for attendance purposes. Those students will be included in your October 1 ADM count for purposes of state grants.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess to follow up on the high school, our students go to one of the endowed academies and the head of school for the academy recently stated or shared his frustration with the state back to school guidelines and really whether the academy will be able to meet those requirements. So now we are starting to receive comment from parents of our high school students questioning whether they should send their children to high school in the fall or whether they should be looking at homeschooling. So even though we don't have a high school, we're starting to get some of those questions as well.
Yeah.
We've heard that and read in newspaper clippings that probably the average among the parents who say their students are not coming back is probably 15 to 20. I've seen even higher. So I think there's at least something of a feeling of the department that if you're educating 15 to 20% of your kids at home through distance learning, you are already sort of using the hybrid model. So I don't know if that will mean they're going to change what they say officially, but certainly with that many kids out, school is going to look different.
Bob, this is Andy from Stanford. So what's starting to emerge, or what we're hearing a little bit about, are these pods, private pods, where the families, the affluent families, are getting together to hire a teacher and such. I just don't know how prevalent. I don't know if other districts are starting to experience that or hearing about it.
I did read, Andy, about a group of parents in Southington. They weren't going to hire a teacher, but they were going to share the instruction among the adults in the group.
True, whether the parents themselves do it or they hire a teacher or such. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's going to possibly, again, affect the attendance.
Has anybody else heard of those type of situations? Sort of parents taking things into their own hands?
I have not heard of formal pods, but we certainly have a couple new groups in this area who are going to be teaming together for homeschool. And if the parents have a certain area of specialty, that they will be teaching that topic. And if not, they will be hiring out for private tutors to supplement.
Yeah, the same issue is surfacing in Wilton. There are groups of parents, it seems more at the elementary level, who are interested in doing either homeschooling or hiring private tutors to come into the house and perhaps share the tutor with other students. We don't know how widespread that is, but there has been an article in our local press, and we have received some emails about parents saying, well, you know, if you don't get it the way we want you to, then perhaps this is an idea I will use. And there's some social chatter, of course, on social media. But again, I don't know how many voices.
I would say in Canton, this is Julie, that we've had a lot of chatter around the homeschooling, people looking at even online distance learning platforms that are outside of the public school system. And just to echo the concerns around the middle school, high school students and the latest information that's come out. And there's also a lot of confusion in our community around the hybrid models, and, you know, some press that's been out there around districts that are saying they're starting off the school year with the hybrid model. And even trying to clarify for the community, I'm still getting emails saying, why aren't we implementing a hybrid model like this? And you know, so that's been kind of a frustration from my perspective, is, you know, we're trying to follow the state guidelines, but there's just we're getting a lot of pushback right now.
Others want to address these issues? Well, let me ask another question. How are you addressing transportation at this point? You packing them in the buses? Are you encouraging parents to drop off their kids?
So I guess in Woodstock, we are right now, if we're going to the on-campus model, we are busing as normal. However, we have sent out a questionnaire to parents asking their comfort level with their child being on the bus and whether they would intend to have their child ride the bus. And of the surveys that we received, which is about 90%, about 35% said they will be driving, dropping off and picking up their child from school, that they do not want their child on the bus. We also have use a private company for our busing, and we know that of our local bus drivers, there is great concern about how busing will work, particularly without monitors on the bus, with our youngest students. I don't know if any other districts have found this, but we had approached some of our paraprofessionals asking if they would be interested in being monitors on the bus. And they have been encouraged by their union to not volunteer or not acknowledge those requests or offers.
I would add something about the monitors. We've looked at this for a little while. I think we've come to the conclusion it's just not practically going to be doable to have monitors because of, well, that variety of complications that I'm sure everyone's experiencing. But we have been talking about protocols with the drivers, just to give, you know, occasional stops and reminders to the kids, and just kind of reinforce the protocols. And we are also actively encouraging people to drive. Obviously, that doesn't work in every district, but we happen to be doing that.
In Wilton, in a normal year, probably about 40% of our parents drive. We sent out a recent survey and got the response that 75% of our parents would prefer to drive their kids. So the good news is that it takes the pressure off of buses. The bad news is that it creates certainly a bottleneck in parking lots and traffic jams. So we're going to need to figure all of that out. We also considered the idea of bus monitors. We first went to the bus company. They came back with a ridiculous amount of money for them to provide them. And again, now that we know we're probably going to have very low ridership, we probably will back away from the monitor idea. But again, nothing's in stone. Thanks.
I should add that we're also going to have training days for students on bus protocol, for lack of a better way of saying it. And we started coordinating with our town hall and town constables to handle the backups on the state roads up here for our drop off and pickup times.
Patrice, you want to ask the last question?
Sure. Well, actually, there are two that I want to ask. First, I want to respond. Eileen asked whether districts could be sued if a teacher or student becomes ill. And my answer to that is the answer I always give when asked if a district can be sued. You can be sued if you take an action, and you can be sued if you don't take an action. The question is, would you have liability as a district? You won't have individual liability, certainly. You do have governmental immunity, and the feeling around any COVID lawsuit is that the plaintiff would have to prove causation, that it was absolutely true that because they were in school and you had not followed the appropriate procedures that they contracted the virus. So that would be a significant challenge to meet that test. But two final questions for the board chairs, and you can answer both or either one of them. There has certainly been discussion as to whether boards have to act on the plans before they're submitted to the department, and there is no requirement that there be official board action before those plans are submitted tomorrow. However, some boards have at least had a discussion about the plan. Some boards have taken action. Some boards do plan to act before, once it's clear which of the three options is to be used at the beginning of the school year, they do plan to act then. So that's the first question. Have you acted, or do you have plans to act as a board? And are you planning to take advantage of the opportunity to use the first 3 days of your school year? So you would have 177 instructional days, not 180, if you use those first 3 days for professional development and for preparation for the opening of schools, both for your families and for your staff. Thoughts?
So I guess I can say from Woodstock, yes, the school board will actually be taking action tonight. All board members recognize that it is not required, but we thought it was important as if anything, not anything else, a show of solidarity with our administrators and teachers and the work that they have put in for creating these plans. I'm sure we'll do something additional when it becomes clear which of the models will have to be implemented come the beginning of school year. We also do plan on taking advantage of those 3 days, and could also be using the days after that to bring, at least at the K-8 level, a grade back for each school per day. So for example, kindergarten and 5th grade would start on day 1, and then it would be 2nd grade and 6th grade until we have everybody in, and then have full everybody back on September 8th.
Terrific.
I would speak to the voting question. So we've gotten very strong advice from our attorneys that we need to be careful and separate out operational from budget and policy. And also that the minute that we vote on the plan, we've kind of locked ourselves in, and it's best to continue to look and revise the plan throughout the summer. And so to keep that kind of operational flexibility as things change. And so I've been, and also on these CABE meetings up until last week, that was also the messaging I got here, that we were not to vote on operational, just on budget and policy. And I've been, kind of correct, messaging that to my board, so I feel like the message has gotten a little mixed, and I'm slightly frustrated and by that. And I think we're going to stick with this approach where we're not voting. We're having our meeting tonight and we're not voting fully on the plan, but we will be having a series of votes related to budgetary impact and policy impact. But I'm curious what other, districts are doing.
In Wilton, we have a board meeting tonight as well. We had gone more with Megan's attitude that it would be important to show the public superintendent, are supportive of all the work being done. So we were going to add a statement that said, yes, we are submitting the 3 plans as required by the state. Yes, we think detail are working today. And but also, make the statement, as I've already talked about, the idea that we would hope the state would, Wilton, in Wilton, we prefer to look at differentiating which plans actually get implemented based on the level of the students, the age of the students. So in other words, we were planning on saying, yes, the form's filled out correctly. Yes, we like the details that we see if any of those plans come to fruition, and making a statement about we are not endorsing any particular plan. In fact, we'd rather go into being able to look at each age group and make our best determination locally based on the most current health and safety data.
And I think whether you adopt a plan or not, the continued messaging that any plan that you're considering today will continue to be revised and improved based on the most current information. Other thoughts?
This is Fiona from the Torrington Board of Education. So we did not vote the plan, but what we did is we had a meeting last night where the public, in advance of our meeting, was able to view the 3 plans, provide questions through email or call in. The board discussed the plan and a consent had, but we did not take an official vote on the plan. We don't feel it's in our purview to do that. We are taking advantage of the 3 days. And the only other question I had on the bus monitors and people opting to not do it, it's our understanding from council there has to be someone responsible on the buses for mask enforcement. And it cannot be the bus driver unless they're willing to take on that responsibility. But you are not allowed, in the absence of someone, to make sure that kids are keeping their masks on. If the bus company didn't agree with it, then you could not just not have someone on that bus to monitor the mask. So I'm curious how other districts are going to get around that and not have an adult responsible for mask enforcement on the buses. Thank you.
I would just say there's nothing that I've seen in the state requirements that requires that you have an additional adult or that anyone on the bus actually be responsible for mask enforcement. I think many districts, particularly for younger students, were thinking that, at least for the first few weeks of the school year, until the students were used to the protocol, that having an adult responsible for that would be helpful, but it's not a legal requirement at this point.
I just want to chime in and say that I feel that enforcement of masks, whether on the bus or in school, is really going to be very difficult. And I don't really have an answer how to move forward with that. But I do think that teachers don't want to spend the day saying, put your mask on. And I think it's going to be a nightmare, to tell you the truth, especially in Waterbury, with you have so many students coming to school. So it's just something we're going to have to deal with and see how it plays out. We're just hoping that the honor system plays out and that people, will be informed and want to do it. But I think enforcement is going to be very difficult.
I appreciate the discussion you've had about the various approaches you're taking to reviewing the plans, adopting the plans as a way to show support for the work of your administration, or on the other hand, saying we're going to focus on the policy and budget issues and leave the operational pieces to the administration. And I think that just reflects the variety of practices that exist even pre-COVID in our districts in terms of things that boards feel they want to take an action on, take a vote on, and things that they simply want to be informed about. So thank you for that discussion. With that, we've reached 12 o'clock. So I think we will bring this session to a close. Now, next week, the board chair check-in will need to end at 11:45 because, as Lisa pointed out, we have our summer leadership conference starting at noon, and Will Marie produces all of our virtual meetings. So she needs to be able to switch over and initiate the summer leadership program. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 11 o'clock from 11 to 11:45. And we hope that we will then see you at summer leadership starting next Tuesday. For those of you that are graduates of CABE's Leadership Institute, we will be having our virtual reunion on Monday, this coming Monday at noon. You would have received a separate email about that. With that, on behalf of the CABE staff, we hope that you stay safe and healthy. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Good stuff. Good news. Keep up the good work.